Interestingly, if you like, I'm not here because this was my choice. You very kindly asked me to.
Confrontations, imagined private meetings, quotes nobody actually said. This is not that. Everything in this script is drawn from public record, royal biographies. The official Roy there is a version of royal storytelling that thrives on rumor, invented our family website, and recent reporting on Princess Anne's actual schedule and career. No conversation in this script is invented, and no motive is assigned to anyone that they have not stated themselves. What follows is simply the real story, and it turns out the real story is more interesting than the fictional one. Princess Anne was born an Elizabeth Alice Louise on the 15th of August 1950 at Clarence House in London. She is the second child and only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and the younger sister of King Charles III. At birth, she stood third in line to the throne. Today, more than 7 decades later, and with a growing generation of royal children ahead of her, she sits 18th in line. A reminder that in the modern monarchy, proximity to the crown and proximity to the work of the crown are two very different things, and has spent her life demonstrating that the second matters far more than the first. She was educated first at Buckingham Palace itself, and then, from 1963, at Benenden School in Kent, where she left in 1968 with 6 A-levels and 2 A-levels. The following year, at just 18 years old, she undertook her first official royal engagement, the opening of an educational and training center in Shropshire. That single visit in 1969 marked the beginning of what would become, by any measurable standard, one of the longest and most consistent careers of public service in the modern royal family. To understand why Princess Anne is so often described as the hardest working royal, it helps to look at the numbers rather than the headlines. In 2023, she carried out 433 official engagements. In 2024, that rose to 457. In 2025, her total climbed again to 478, an increase of just over 10% on the previous year, even as she moved further into her 70s. For comparison, King Charles III carried out 532 engagements in 2025, narrowly ahead of his sister, while the Duke of Edinburgh recorded 313 and the Duchess of Edinburgh 235, and had held the unofficial title of busiest working royal for years running, in 2023 and 2024 specifically, before her brother the King edged past her in the most recent count. Even so, royal commentators and members of the public alike continue to point to her as the standard-bearer for sheer consistency of duty within the family. Her own description of her approach to the role has been reported by those who have worked closely with her. Kevin S. MacLeod, who served as the Canadian Secretary to the Queen, once summarized her attitude simply, that her guiding principle is to stay busy, to be present, to do good work, and to meet as many people as she can. That is not the language of someone performing for cameras. It is the language of someone who treats royal duty as exactly that, a duty, carried out whether or not anyone is watching closely. The scope of that duty is enormous. Princess Anne is formally involved with more than 200 charities and organizations, and some tallies put the number closer to 300 when military regiments and honorary positions are included. Her longest-running association is with Save the Children, where she served as president from 1970 until 2017, a term of nearly half a century, and has remained patron ever since. In that role, she has traveled to some of the organization's most difficult project sites, including Bangladesh, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Mozambique, Ethiopia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Her humanitarian record was significant enough that in 1990 she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Kenneth Kaunda, then president of Zambia. Beyond Save the Children, and has personally founded or helped establish several charitable institutions that continue to operate today. The Princess Royals Trust for Carers, now known as the Carers Trust, provides support to the millions of people across the United Kingdom who care for a family member or loved one, often without pay or public recognition. A cause that echoes, in its way, the unglamorous and largely unseen nature of her own approach to public life. She also helped found Transcend and Riders for Health, two organizations working to solve transportation barriers that prevent healthcare access in developing countries, an issue that draws directly on her lifelong relationship with horses and mobility. That relationship with horses is itself a defining thread of her biography, and became a serious competitive equestrian, winning individual gold at the 1971 European Eventing Championships aboard her homebred horse Doublet, a result that also earned her the BBC Sports Personality of the Year award that same year, the only member of the British royal family ever to receive it. She added 2 silver medals at the 1975 European Eventing Championships, and the following year she made history as the first member of the royal family to compete at the Olympic Games, riding for Great Britain at the 1976 Montreal Olympics. She has remained connected to that world ever since, serving as a member of the International Olympic Committee since 1988 and as president of the British Olympic Association, a role that took her to Rio de Janeiro in 2016 to meet Team GB ahead of the Games. In June of this year, nearly 50 years after Montreal, she was reported to have reunited with fellow athletes from that 1976 team, a rare full-circle moment in a career built on decades of continuity rather than singular spotlight events. Her public role is not confined to charity patronages and sporting history. As a working member of the royal family, and regularly represents the king at ceremonial and ambassadorial functions both in Britain and abroad, standing in for the monarch at state and ceremonial occasions, and attending national moments of commemoration, such as Trooping the Colour and the Remembrance Day service at the Cenotaph. In 2025, she traveled to the bailiwick of Guernsey to mark the 80th anniversary of the island's liberation on the king's behalf, and during that visit, she became the first member of the royal family ever to set foot on Little Sark, one of the smallest and most remote inhabited parts of the British Isles. It is the kind of engagement that generates little tabloid attention, but exemplifies the substance of what her working life actually involves, representing the crown in places most senior royals never visit at all. The year 2026 has followed the same pattern of steady, wide-ranging duty. Her first official engagement of the year came on the 8th of January, when she attended the Oxford Farming Conference in her capacity as honorary president and patron, a fitting choice given her decades-long association with British agriculture and rural life. In February, amid a difficult stretch for the royal family following the arrest and subsequent release of her younger brother Prince Andrew, and kept to her existing schedule rather than stepping back from public view, she visited HMP Leeds in her long-standing role as patron of the Butler Trust, a position she has held since 1985, and later that month attended the Six Nations rugby match between Wales and Scotland at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. In April, she opened the Queen Elizabeth II Garden on what would have been her mother's 100th birthday, a personal tribute layered onto an official duty. Reports from earlier this year also describe her, alongside her brother Prince Edward, quietly providing private support to Andrew as the family worked through the fallout of his legal troubles. Support offered away from cameras, consistent with how she has always preferred to operate. Her spring and early summer calendar continued at the same pace. In May, she attended a Buckingham Palace garden party as patron of the Not Forgotten Association, mingling with military veterans, and was photographed sharing a warm moment with a Second World War veteran that was widely shared by royal watchers. Later that month, she paid tribute to broadcaster Sir David Attenborough ahead of his 100th birthday. In June, her son Peter Phillips married Harriet Sperling, and then played a visible role in hosting the couple's wedding reception, a rare moment where her public duties and private family life intersected publicly. That same month, Buckingham Palace announced that Anne and her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, would undertake an international royal tour the following month. By late June, she was back in her more typical routine, attending the Royal Norfolk Show before traveling on to Portsmouth, a schedule she carried out on the same day Japan's Emperor and Empress were being hosted on a state visit to Belgium, a small illustration of how much of the monarchy's actual daily workload happens away from the marquee state events that draw the cameras. Married twice. First to Captain Mark Phillips from 1973 until their divorce in 1992, and since 1992 to Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, and has 2 children, Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall, both born before she held the title of Princess Royal, and both, at her and Mark Phillips's choice, given no royal titles at all. She explained that decision in a 2020 interview with Vanity Fair, saying she believed there were real downsides to holding a title, and that declining one for her children was probably the right call. It is a detail that speaks to her broader instinct throughout her life, a preference for substance and practicality over ceremony and status for its own sake. She has not been immune to controversy or misfortune. In March 1974, she survived a kidnapping attempt on the Mall in London when a gunman, Ian Ball, forced her car to stop and attempted to abduct her. Her personal protection officer and others were shot and wounded in the struggle before Ball was apprehended. Ball later pleaded guilty to attempted murder and kidnapping and was found to be suffering from schizophrenia. He spent 45 years in mental hospitals before his release in 2019, and decades later offered a different account of his own motives, though that account has not changed the historical record of the event. The incident became notable enough to inspire a television docudrama and a storyline in Tom Clancy's novel Patriot Games, in a very different kind of first, and also became the first member of the British royal family to be convicted of a criminal offense, pleading guilty in November 2002 to a charge under the Dangerous Dogs Act after one of her dogs injured 2 children in Windsor Great Park. She was fined £500. Her closeness to her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, defined some of the most significant moments of her adult life. When the Queen died at Balmoral in September 2022, it was, and who acted as the informant of death, signing the official certificate alongside the attending doctor, a role that fell to her both by circumstance and by the trust placed in her. Later that same month, she became the first woman in royal history to take part in a Vigil of the Princes, standing guard beside her mother's coffin, first at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh and again at Westminster Hall in London, an honor previously reserved exclusively for male members of the family. Reporting since has described how she quietly supported her mother behind the scenes in the Queen's final period, including in decisions about where the Queen would choose to spend her last days. None of this fits neatly into a narrative of palace drama, confrontation, or scandal. What the actual record shows is something more understated. A woman who began working for the institution at 18 and well into her 70s has still not meaningfully slowed down, who has represented the crown on nearly every continent, who built and sustained charitable organizations that outlasted the news cycles that covered their founding, and who has approached both personal tragedy and personal achievement with the same steady, largely private manner. Her reputation as the family's most reliable working member was not manufactured by a single viral moment or a single dramatic exchange. It was built engagement by engagement, year by year, for more than 55 years. If there is a lesson in Princess Anne's public life, it is not one about palace rivalries or generational clashes dressed up as breaking news. It is simpler than that. In an institution often defined in the public imagination by ceremony, controversy, and speculation, her career stands as evidence that the most durable form of royal authority may be the least dramatic kind, showing up consistently for decades, long after anyone is still counting.